On January 15, 2016, 8-year-old Elliot Winters disappeared during a family ice fishing trip near Lake Minchemina in central Alaska. His father had turned away for just 3 minutes to check another fishing hole. When he looked back, Elliot was gone. Only a single small footprint remained at the edge of the fishing spot, along with peculiar drag marks in the snow that stopped abruptly after 15 feet. The search lasted for weeks. Dogs lost his scent at the tree line. Helicopters found nothing. Then, on February 23, 2023, 7 years later, a bush pilot spotted something unusual, a figure drawing perfect circles in the snow near an abandoned mining outpost, 78 miles from where the boy had vanished. It was Elliot Winters, now 15 years old. He was severely malnourished, his hair down to his waist, fingernails long and yellow. When asked what happened, he simply whispered, "The circles protect us from the cold man." But what really happened to Elliot Winters and who had taken him, you will find out in this video. Elliot Winters was the only child of Mark and Sarah Winters, residents of Fairbanks, Alaska. Mark worked as a geological surveyor for the state, while Sarah taught at the local elementary school. Ice fishing was a winter tradition for the family. On January 15, 2016, they drove to Lake Minchemina, arriving at 7:42 a.m. according to the park entrance log. The temperature was minus 17 degrees Fahrenheit with light snowfall. Mark signed in at the ranger station, noting they planned to fish until 4 p.m. Security footage shows Elliot wearing a bright blue parka with reflective strips, black snow pants, and carrying a small tackle box his grandfather had given him for Christmas. At the general store nearby, they purchased hot chocolate and additional bait at 8:15 a.m. The cashier later recalled that Elliot seemed excited, talking about wanting to catch the biggest fish in Alaska. They reached their usual spot on the northeast corner of the lake by 9 a.m. Mark set up 2 fishing holes about 20 feet apart. Sarah stayed at the car to prepare thermoses of hot chocolate. This was the last normal moment the family would share. At 11:37 a.m., Mark Winters contacted the park rangers via radio, his voice frantic. According to the transcript, he reported, "My son is gone. I can't find my son." The ranger on duty, Kevin Dalton, immediately dispatched the on-site emergency response team. They arrived at the Winters location at 11:52 a.m. Sarah was by then hysterical, according to first responder notes. Mark explained that he had been showing Elliot how to set up a line at the first hole. He then walked to the second hole to check his earlier catch, which he estimated took no more than 3 minutes. When he turned back, Elliot was no longer at the first fishing hole. Mark initially assumed the boy had walked back to his mother at the car approximately 50 yards away. When he discovered Elliot wasn't there, he began calling his name and searching the immediate area. The rangers noted one clear, child-sized footprint at the edge of the ice hole, facing toward the tree line. There were unusual marks in the snow extending from that point toward the forest. Not footprints, but continuous parallel indentations approximately 8 inches apart that the initial report described as consistent with something being dragged. Most puzzling was that these marks stopped abruptly after about 15 feet, as if whatever made them had simply vanished. Park rangers immediately initiated emergency search protocols. Within the hour, all available personnel were mobilized, including 4 K9 units specializing in cold weather tracking. The temperature had dropped to minus 21 degrees. Visibility remained good, but light snow had been falling for several hours, potentially compromising tracks. The dogs followed the scent to the tree line where the drag marks ended, then became confused. The handler noted that the lead dog, an experienced tracker named Ranger, exhibited unusual behavior, circling and whining rather than indicating a clear direction. "In 15 years, I've never seen him react this way," the handler stated in his report. It was as if the scent just disappeared. By nightfall, the search expanded to include Alaska State troopers and volunteers from nearby communities. Thermal imaging equipment was deployed from helicopters, but the rocky terrain retained heat differently, creating numerous false readings. The official search continued for 18 days before being officially suspended on February 2nd. The file notes, exhaustive efforts yielded no further evidence of the child's whereabouts or condition. Mark and Sarah Winters refused to give up. They established a foundation, hired private investigators, and returned to Lake Minchumina monthly for the next 2 years. The case file remained open but inactive. As the 5th anniversary of Elliot's disappearance approached, most officials privately classified it as likely fatal exposure with the body unrecoverable. On February 23, 2023, at approximately 10:15 a.m., bush pilot Thomas Jeffries was flying supplies to a remote research station when he observed something unusual near the abandoned Coldfoot mining outpost, 78 miles northwest of Lake Minchumina. In his initial report, Jeffries stated, "I saw a figure in the snow. At first I thought it was an animal, maybe a caribou. Then I realized it was a person, walking in perfect circles. Just going around and around, I knew something wasn't right." Jeffries marked the GPS coordinates and contacted authorities via radio. The nearest Alaska State Trooper unit was dispatched from a station 40 miles away. First responders arrived at 12:27 p.m. They found a teenage male with extremely long hair and beard, wearing what appeared to be hand-stitched animal hides and fur. He was drawing circles in the snow with a stick, moving with precise mechanical steps. The subject did not respond to verbal communication. The medical responders' notes indicate that when approached, the subject continued drawing circles, becoming increasingly agitated when attempts were made to interrupt this behavior. Eventually, they were able to place a blanket around his shoulders and guide him to the transport vehicle, though he resisted briefly when the stick was removed from his hands. The subject was transported to Fairbanks Memorial Hospital, arriving at 3:12 p.m. During intake, a hospital bracelet from his childhood vaccination visit was discovered still attached to his ankle, expanded and embedded in scar tissue. This led to his tentative identification as Elliot Winters. The initial medical assessment documented severe malnourishment with a body weight of 92 pounds, approximately 40% below expected weight for his age and height. The subject exhibited symptoms consistent with long-term vitamin D deficiency, including skeletal deformities and characteristic skin lesions. His fingernails were described as thickened, yellowed, and curved, consistent with chronic nutritional deficiencies. Core body temperature was measured at 94.2 degrees Celsius, despite apparent adaptation to cold weather. Dental examination revealed 6 missing teeth and severe decay. Blood work showed numerous abnormalities indicative of long-term nutritional deficits and potential exposure to environmental toxins. The report notes, subject's physical condition inconsistent with normal wilderness survival. Some aspects suggest periods of confinement or severely restricted movement. Most notably, circular scar patterns were documented on both ankles and wrists, consistent with long-term restraint by rigid material. Hospital staff observed that the subject appeared to understand English, but rarely spoke. When he did, it was in short, fragmentary sentences. He repeatedly requested "my stick" and became agitated when told it wasn't available. When asked his name, he eventually whispered Elliot, after the question was repeated several times. DNA comparison with samples from Mark and Sarah Winters confirmed his identity within 24 hours. The hospital psychologist noted that when the subject slept, he positioned himself in a tight fetal position in the corner of the bed rather than lying flat, suggesting habitual adaptation to a confined sleeping space. When Elliot was deemed medically stable enough for questioning, Detective Nathan Brower of the Alaska State Troopers Special Crimes Investigation Unit conducted the initial interview. According to the transcript, Elliot's responses were minimal and often cryptic. When asked what happened on the day he disappeared, he stated, "The cold man took me to the circles." Further questioning about the cold man yielded little information beyond. He lives under, takes children to help him. When pressed for details about where he had been for 7 years, Elliot provided what the detective initially interpreted as delusional responses. The cold. Place. Under the ground. Making circles. The circles keep him away. He claimed he had escaped when the door was left open, but could not specify when this occurred or how far he had traveled. The most coherent narrative Elliot provided was, "We dug. All day, we dug. In the circles. Looking for the shiny rocks. If we found enough, we got food." He indicated there were others, but became extremely agitated when asked for names or numbers, repeating only, "They didn't draw the circles right." Detective Brower's preliminary assessment noted, "Subject appears traumatized, but not actively delusional. His account, while fragmentary, has internal consistency. However, the physical evidence contradicts several aspects of his narrative, raising concerns about potential coaching or confabulation." As the investigation continued, Detective Brower developed what his notes term internal suspicion regarding Elliot's account. The transcript notes that this was standard procedure given the unusual circumstances and inconsistencies in the subject's story. The physical evidence presented several troubling contradictions to Elliot's narrative. While he claimed to have been kept under the ground for years, his vitamin D deficiency was significant, but not as severe as would be expected with complete absence of sunlight. The calluses on his hands were relatively recent, inconsistent with years of digging. Most significantly, forensic analysis of the animal hide clothing he was wearing indicated that some pieces were no more than 4 months old, suggesting either access to hunting tools or contact with others during his alleged captivity. Detective Brower's report states, "The possibility must be considered that the subject is concealing information about his circumstances, including potential voluntary participation in his situation or the involvement of others who remain unidentified." When questioned again with these inconsistencies highlighted, Elliot became nonverbal, assuming a fetal position and drawing circles with his finger on the bedsheet. The investigation began to consider alternative theories, including potential family involvement or a complex runaway scenario. Mark and Sarah Winters were subjected to extensive questioning. The case file indicates that financial records, phone records, and all communication devices belonging to the family were examined for evidence of deception or involvement. Multiple interviews with family members, friends, and colleagues revealed no indications of abuse or neglect prior to Elliot's disappearance. The psychological assessment noted, "Parents display signs of genuine distress and disbelief consistent with long-term traumatic separation and reunion, not consistent with deception." 3 weeks into the renewed investigation, an unexpected development shifted its direction. A park ranger from Denali National Park, Michael Coleman, contacted Detective Brower after seeing a news report about Elliot's recovery. Coleman reported an incident from 2021 that had not previously been connected to the Winters case. According to his statement, "In August 2021, we found an unauthorized campsite in a restricted area of the park. The occupant fled before we could make contact, but we recovered several items, including a crude map drawn on birch bark and what appeared to be a journal written on animal hide. There were drawings of circles with strange markings inside them. The items had been logged as evidence in a trespassing case but not processed further. When retrieved from storage, the journal, written in cramped, irregular handwriting, contained disturbing references to the children who draw the circles and teaching them to find the special metal. Most significant was a crude ledger that appeared to track acquisitions with dates and locations. One entry read, LM011516 M8, with the notation, Good Finder, Obedient. Detective Brower recognized the alphanumeric code immediately. Lake Minchamena, January 15, 2016, male, 8 years old, matching Elliot's disappearance exactly. The journal contained 5 similar entries with different location codes and dates, spanning from 2012 to 2019. The file notes that Coleman also reported, there was something else that seemed odd at the time. Around the abandoned campsite, there were dozens of perfect circles drawn in the dirt, just like the ones you mentioned the boy was drawing in the snow. With this new evidence, investigators expanded their search to other missing persons cases in Alaska, matching the journal entries. 3 additional cases were identified: a 9-year-old girl who disappeared from a campground in 2012, a 7-year-old boy who vanished from a rural homestead in 2014, and a 10-year-old girl reported missing during a family hike in 2019. None had been resolved. When shown photographs of these children, Elliot became visibly distressed. According to the interview transcript, he stated, "Circle children, they didn't learn right." When pressed about where these children were now, he would only say, "Gone. They didn't draw the circles." Forensic analysis of the journal revealed additional information. The special metal appeared to be references to gold or other precious metals. The hide on which it was written came from a caribou, with tanning methods consistent with traditional but crude preservation techniques. Most importantly, fingerprint analysis identified partial prints belonging to someone other than Elliot. These were run through AFIS, Automated Fingerprint Identification System, and matched to Viktor Karlov, a 62-year-old Russian immigrant with a history of minor offenses, including trespassing on federal land and illegal mining claims. Karlov had last been documented in a 2011 arrest for attempting to establish an unauthorized mining operation near Denali. At that time, he had claimed to be prospecting based on special knowledge of gold deposits. The investigating officer noted that Karlov had been living in extremely primitive conditions and expressed unusual beliefs about the special abilities of children to locate precious metals. When confronted with this information, Elliot finally began to provide more coherent details. As the interview transcript records, he made us find the gold, said children could feel it under the ground. Elliot described being kept in what he called the dig place, an abandoned mining tunnel that had been expanded and modified. There were rooms with doors, metal doors that locked. He kept us in there when we weren't digging. According to his account, Karlov forced the children to search for gold deposits by walking in systematic patterns, circles of increasing diameter, over specific areas. He said we were special, could feel the metal singing under our feet. The children who successfully located deposits were rewarded with food and occasional time outside. Those who failed were punished through food restriction or confinement in what Elliot described as the dark box. The forensic psychologist's assessment noted, subject appears to have developed a trauma bond with his captor, along with adaptive behaviors to ensure survival. The circle drawing compulsion likely represents both a survival mechanism and a manifestation of traumatic conditioning. When asked how he escaped, Elliot's account remained fragmentary. The door was open. The cold man was sleeping. I took food and ran, kept making the circles so he wouldn't find me. Based on Elliot's information and the recovered journal, a task force was established to locate the underground facility. Using topographical maps and known abandoned mining claims, they identified 3 potential locations within the radius Elliot could reasonably have traveled before being discovered. On March 17, 2023, search teams located an entrance partially concealed by rocks and vegetation approximately 12 miles from where Elliot had been found. The entrance led to an old mining tunnel that had been expanded into a crude living facility. The scene investigation report describes a main tunnel extending approximately 400 feet into the mountainside, with several chambers branching off. These included a central area with primitive cooking facilities, storage spaces, and 5 small cells with metal doors and simple locking mechanisms. Inside the cells, investigators found crude sleeping pallets, waste buckets, and, most disturbingly, extensive circle patterns scratched into the rock walls. One chamber contained mining equipment, and detailed maps with circular patterns marked across them. Another held a collection of children's items, small shoes, clothing fragments, and toys, apparently taken from the captives and kept as trophies. Forensic teams recovered hair, fibers, and DNA evidence matching the profiles of 3 of the 4 identified missing children. No human remains were found on initial search, but cadaver dogs indicated areas of interest deeper in the tunnel system. The report notes, subject appears to have maintained this facility for approximately 10 to 12 years, based on structural layering and material accumulation. Evidence suggests periodic abandonment and return. Viktor Karloff was not present at the facility when it was discovered. Based on Elliott's description and the condition of the site, investigators believed Karloff might have relocated after Elliott's escape. A statewide alert was issued with Karloff's description. On March 24th, a convenience store clerk in Healy, approximately 100 miles from the tunnel site, reported a customer matching Karloff's description, purchasing large quantities of non-perishable food items, batteries, and propane. Surveillance footage confirmed his identity. Alaska State Troopers and FBI agents established surveillance on the area. On March 26th, Karloff was observed returning to a small cabin 3 miles outside town. According to the arrest report, subject was apprehended without incident while loading supplies into a snowmobile. He did not resist and made no statements at time of arrest. During processing, officers noted that Karloff wore a necklace made from what appeared to be small bones and teeth. Forensic analysis later confirmed these included human deciduous baby teeth. In custody, Karloff initially refused to speak with investigators. After 3 days, he requested paper and sketched complex circular patterns with notations in Russian. The translation revealed these to be what he termed maps of the singing metal, his belief system about locating precious metals. When finally interviewed with a Russian interpreter present, Karloff expressed no remorse, stating only, "Children hear the metal, adults cannot. I taught them to listen." He claimed to have developed this belief while working in Siberian mines in the 1980s, where he observed that children always cried or became excited in places where gold was later found. The psychological evaluation diagnosed Karloff with delusional disorder with paranoid features, noting, subject has constructed an elaborate belief system around the special abilities of children to detect precious metals. This delusion has remained fixed for decades and directly motivated his criminal actions. When asked about the children who were no longer present at the facility, Karloff stated matter-of-factly, "They failed, could not hear the singing, became useless." He refused to elaborate on their fates or locations. Extended searches of the tunnel system and surrounding areas eventually led to the recovery of human remains. In a deeper shaft, investigators discovered the remains of 2 children, later identified through dental records as the missing girl from 2012 and boy from 2014. Forensic examination indicated probable cause of death as malnutrition and exposure. The remains of the 2019 female victim were not located despite extensive searching. Based on documentation in Karloff's journal, investigators believe she may have been relocated to another facility that remains undiscovered. The journal contained references to multiple listening posts across the Alaskan wilderness. During continued questioning, Karloff hinted at other locations, but provided no actionable information, stating only, "More children are listening for me." During Elliott's ongoing therapy, additional details emerged about the captivity conditions. The transcript notes, "He kept us on schedules. Wake up, eat little food, then dig all day. Walk the circles. Listen for the song." Elliott indicated that children were kept isolated from each other except during digging sessions, likely to prevent cooperation or escape planning. He described how Karloff would demonstrate the circular walking pattern each morning, perfect circles, had to be perfect. If you went outside the line, no food. This explained Elliot's compulsive circle drawing. It had been both a survival mechanism and a deeply ingrained response to trauma. The forensic psychiatrist noted, the subject appears to have incorporated the circle walking as a safety behavior. In his mind, correctly performing this action meant survival. Most disturbing was Elliot's description of what happened to children who failed to hear the metal singing. They were forced into increasingly restricted spaces, with diminishing food, until they either found the song or, as Elliot put it, went to sleep and didn't wake up. When asked if he had ever heard the singing, Elliot nodded and whispered, "I learned to pretend, to say I heard it in the right places. That's why I'm still here." On September 12, 2023, Viktor Karloff was charged with 4 counts of kidnapping, 2 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and multiple counts of child endangerment and abuse. He was found competent to stand trial despite his delusional disorder. The trial began on February 3, 2024, with Elliot Winters as the key witness. During his testimony, delivered via closed-circuit television, Elliot provided additional details about Karloff's operation. The transcript records him stating, "He told us there were other men who knew about the singing children. They would pay him for the gold we found." This suggested a potential wider network, though no corroborating evidence was found in the investigation. Karloff maintained his delusional justifications throughout the trial, showing no remorse or recognition of wrongdoing. On March 22, 2024, he was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. During sentencing, the judge noted, "The methodical cruelty exhibited in this case represents the darkest capabilities of human delusion translated into action." The search for the remains of the 2019 victim continues, based on geographical analysis of Karloff's journal entries and ongoing investigation into his movements prior to capture. Additional missing persons cases from Alaska and neighboring Canadian territories are being reviewed for possible connections, though no further definitive links have been established. The FBI maintains an active file on potential accomplices or similar operations prompted by Elliot's testimony about others and journal entries that suggest possible communications with unnamed associates. The case file notes, investigation continues into potential trafficking or distribution networks for illegally mined gold and precious metals using child labor. Elliot Winters remains under intensive therapeutic care. According to medical records, he has gained weight and shows improvement in his physical condition, though certain developmental impacts from malnutrition and vitamin deficiency appear permanent. The psychological assessment notes persistent trauma symptoms, nightmares, hypervigilance, and dissociative episodes. Most notably, he continues to draw circles when under stress. His therapist's notes indicate the circular pattern remains a self-soothing behavior that the subject returns to when feeling threatened or uncertain. Attempts to interrupt this behavior result in extreme anxiety. Elliot lives with his parents, but requires constant supervision and support. The educational assessment indicates significant gaps in formal learning, though he demonstrates advanced knowledge in certain areas related to geology and mineral identification, skills developed during his captivity. When asked about his future during a recent evaluation, Elliot responded, "I don't want to go underground again. I want to stay where I can see the sky." The psychiatric report concludes, subject exhibits psychological conditioning consistent with long-term captivity and survival adaptation. Full recovery remains uncertain, with likelihood of permanent adaptive behaviors and trauma responses. The compulsive circle drawing may persist indefinitely as a manifestation of the survival mechanisms developed during captivity. On cold days, Elliot still goes outside and draws circles in the snow. His parents have learned not to interrupt this ritual. Sometimes his father sits nearby, watching silently as his son traces perfect circles with mechanical precision. According to the most recent treatment notes, Elliot explained this behavior. The circles keep me safe. Inside the circle, he can't reach me. When asked if he knows that Karloff is in prison and can't hurt him anymore, Elliot nodded but continued drawing. Not just him, he said. There are others who know about the singing children. Investigation into this claim continues, but no evidence of accomplices has been found. The file remains open. The final psychiatric evaluation notes. The subject has survived extreme circumstances through adaptations that now frame his perception of reality. The circles represent both his trauma and his mechanism for enduring it. For Elliot, they remain a necessary boundary between himself and a world he experienced as predatory. Recovery will be measured not by the absence of these behaviors, but by their gradual integration into a life that extends beyond the boundaries they represent.